The idea for Strange World came, probably 4 or 5 years ago. Um, and thinking about what my next film was going to be, and what was top of mind at that moment was I was thinking about my kids and what kind of world they're going to inherit when they're older, and what kind of world I inherited from my father, and in terms of the environment. So, wanted to set out to tell an environmental story, but obviously wanted to do it in a fun way, and sort of profiled those adventure stories that I loved as a kid and still love as an adult. Which those adventure stories where a group of explorers find a hidden world. It just felt like it was ripe for originality and imagination, and that could only be provided by Disney animation. So that's kind of where it started. This idea of legacy and fathers, sons, and grandsons.
Speaking of the characters in Strange World, the three male leads are Jaeger Clade, Searcher Clade, and Ethan Clade. Jaeger's like in our world, the Michael Jordan of explorers, probably the most significant celebrity of Avalonia, and his kind of motivating factor is to go out and explore and to pull off something that's completely impossible in the world of Avalonia, which is to get past these impassable mountains that encircle their world of Avalonia, and that has been his lifelong dream. But because of that, his son, our main character, Searcher, his kind of reaction to the obsessiveness of his father and never being able to be tethered into one place is to kind of be the opposite of him. He became a farmer. So instead of a man who's rootless, he wanted to build roots. So his main drive has been to create a legacy that's stable for his son, Ethan. That Ethan can one day inherit this farm and feel the safety of his dad always being there. But the thing is, as we all know as fathers, just because you intend something doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. And Ethan is also a restless spirit. He's a bit Jaeger, he's a bit Searcher. He's a sensitive as Searcher, but he has the same ambitions as his grandfather. And I think that is going to be a nice push and pull between these two men when it comes to how Ethan figures himself out throughout the journey of Strange World. I think for what's so nice about what's so relatable about Jaeger, Searcher, and Ethan is I think all of us as individuals have a little bit of each of those characters in us. We're all ambitious like Jaeger. We all care about our families like Searcher, but we're also restless. We're also people still searching for answers and figuring out ourselves throughout our lives like Ethan. And I think that that's what makes writing these three characters and making them in this movie so delightful, and also just a great thing to explore just emotionally as you bring them to life.
I love stories about fathers and sons. It's something that I've loved since I was a lad. And for me, I had an incredibly strong father. He was a loving father, but he was also a very strict father. And I have to say, when I first heard the story of Strange World, I was hooked because the Jaeger-Searcher relationship actually seemed pretty relatable to me. And I think it's relatable and universal to audiences around the world, because that father-son dynamic is obviously one of the biggest things that happens in any kind of relationship as you're growing up.
A lot of the inspirations for the story kind of came from this idea of pulp and pulp magazines, and which were popular, turn of the century, probably up through the 30s. And they kind of gave way to comic books as well. They were sort of the precursors to comic books, I would say. And they were just stories of adventure, in far-flung places. I thought they were very interesting. It was the inspiration for like Raiders of the Lost Ark and even Star Wars to some degree. But that wasn't the only influence for Strange World. I also looked at early adventure novels from like Jules Verne, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Edgar Rice Burroughs, that late 1800s, early 1900s, which saw sort of the birth of the modern adventure story. The inspiration from those authors also runs through Strange World, as well as, cinematic influences like Spielberg's, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Star Wars and King Kong even.
I think Des Quaid was a perfect piece of casting for Yair Clade. He is the biggest celebrity of the world of Avalonia, and I think having an actor who's had 40 years of experience being in Hollywood, literally he's been in films that Don would often reference while making the film before we even casted him, was super helpful because he was able to imbue his character with as big as it was, this big boisterous spirit that made him super fun. But also there's moments in this film that's super touching and very real, that Dennis was able to imbue with like some real heart and humanity through his own experiences. That I think that is the magic of Yair Clade. He is one of the funniest characters that I've had a chance to write, but also one of the most moving. And that's not always the case when you have someone that big. And so it was so great to have Dennis Quaid be the heart and soul of that character.
Ethan Clade is a terrific character, and he really is the, I think, foundation of the upcoming Clade family, right? He has an amazing relationship with his father. He and his father love one another very much. But Ethan has dreams maybe a little bit beyond his dad. His dad is really wants him to take over the farm. He wants him to be a farmer, and that's the legacy he wants to leave to his son. But somehow Ethan has dreams of maybe something a little more, and that's what he needs to find through the film. Jabuki was the perfect Ethan for us. When he came in, his ability to A, act, and then B, improv, it's so important for our process. We are a collaborative art form, and we are an iterative art form. And so when someone comes in like Jabuki and is able to, riff on like a jazz musician on what we've done, it really makes it fun for us because it expands our story. And he was just so committed and so part of our creation.
Searcher Clade is the main character, our protagonist in Strange World. He is the son of the most famous explorer of all time, this celebrity explorer named Yair Clade. And Yair was, expecting Searcher to follow in his footsteps and be an explorer. Searcher had other ideas, and kind of, lived a life or became an adult and lived his life almost in contrast to his father, where his father was this rootless wanderer. Searcher decided to, put down roots and be a farmer and raise his son with the expectation that his son would take over this farm someday. He is a very affable character, hardworking, but also just very genuine and loving to his wife, loving to his son, loving to his farm, and he's a man who grows things. He knows how to nurture, not just his Pando farm, but also a family. And so, and he was beautifully voiced by Jake Gyllenhaal, who embodied all of those things. And to be perfectly honest, it's also, being the son of a farmer, there's a lot of aspects of my dad that are in Searcher. There's sort of a quiet strength that runs through Searcher. He's not a braggart or a bigger, like Yair, who's, who can, he's very full of himself at times in a very fun way. And there's a lot of braggadocio with Yair, which Searcher does not have. He's much more humble. He's a character that's near and dear to my heart. Well, Jake was the perfect choice to voice our Searcher Clade. I mean, for so many reasons. One, the first being Jake's level of investment in the story. Like from our first meeting, which was supposed to be an hour and lasted 2.5. There was just such an ease that we had with Jake, even though we had just met him. And, it was very evident to us even from that first meeting, that he loved this story, loved the potential of this story as much as we did. And so you cannot ask for anything more than that as a director, for your lead actor. And, Jake's a very busy individual, but he gave us so much of his time graciously because he loves this story. And I think he loves this character. And he was able to put so much nuance in Searcher. Again, Searcher's not a big over the top character like Jaeger is. He's much more grounded, but Jake was able to do that in a very fun way and also be hysterical. I mean, there's Searcher. There's a lot of moments where Searcher's very much out of his comfort zone, and Jake was able to perform that in a very, very entertaining way.
Callisto Mall is the leader of Avalonia. She is a former explorer like Jaeger. She has a history with Searcher, as she was on the expedition that Searcher was on when he discovers Pando. And she's the one that, when it comes to the story, she's the one who ends up knocking on Searcher's door to enlist him on the mission to go into Strange World to save the world. She's brave, she's boisterous, she's really cool. Lucy Liu is, first and foremost, I'm a huge fan of Lucy. She's a hero of mine that I've been following her career for quite a long time. To have her on this film is truly a dream come true, to be able to work with her. But you needed someone for Callisto that was believable to be both a leader, an adventurer, and also funny. Like she carried a lot of different things in the film, and I think that she's quite a scene stealer when she's in the film, as you'll see, with her and Meridian, and that relationship between those two women is one of the greatest surprises that kind of emerged throughout making this movie that we're very proud of having in this film. And I think that Lucy was not just a great actor playing this role, but she was just a great leader of the film itself. She's a great advocate for this film, so I'd love having her on it.
Meridian is the mother in our story. She's married to Searcher Clade and is the mother to Ethan. And that relationship is really special. They really have the ability to talk and talk truth. I think when you're the son of a father who has plans for you, sometimes you use mom as the sounding board for your own thoughts. And that's exactly how Ethan uses Meridian. And the love between them is really something special. Gabrielle Union is so incredibly strong, both as an actress and as a comedian. And she brought so much to the role, both from an improv standpoint and from an acting standpoint. Her Meridian is just delightful. And you really, really understand why Searcher fell in love with this woman. And she's also an amazing pilot, and in the long run is one of the heroes of our story.
Well, in our world of Avalonia, which is the name of our world in Strange World, the entire world is powered by this plant called Pando. It was discovered by Searcher on an expedition when he was a teenager, and he brought it back, and it became this transformational plant that transformed Avalonia from kind of a horse and buggy type city and civilization into giant tall buildings and airships, and people get around by airships. So within Searcher's lifetime, it has transformed, and he's sort of the father of it. He's called the father of Pando. He chooses to remain a humble farmer because that's what he loves, is growing this plant and working on his farm. Well, plants around Avalonia, Pando plants, start dying, and they don't know why. And so President Callisto Mall enlists Searcher to help her go underground to follow the roots of Pando to get to what's ailing it, what's hurting it. And that starts the mission. Ethan, Legend, and Meridian, I won't go into details, but they end up getting involved in the mission as well through a series of circumstances, and so suddenly the whole family is on this adventure underneath the world of Avalonia into this really strange world.
It's fresh, it's different, and the word that we use a lot is chunky. So everything is robust, big, and heavy designs, like in terms of weight, and it's kind of going through everywhere, from the city to the farm, to the house, to the airship that we have, and to the strange world.
Yeah, I was going to say, so really just, working through both Avalonia and Strange World. Avalonia is, very much meant to feel like it could be, our world. It uses a different shape language. The Avalonia for the city itself is a lot of verticals, a lot of kind of boxy shapes. Part of Avalonia is then also the farm, which shape language wise is very much kind of horizontals, inspired by Don's own experiences growing up in a farm, in Iowa. And then, really for both of them on a color palette side, is kind of these green, brown, the feelings really more of what you consider to be Earth. And then once we get into Strange World, that all changes. The shape language becomes much more kind of curves, bubbly. One of the challenges I know for the art team was really then defining a color palette that differentiates it from Avalonia and the farm, which meant that they couldn't use the color green. The green really represented Avalonia. The characters wear green. The airship that we're traveling through uses green, and is meant to look foreign in that Strange World. So then once you got into Strange World, it was about making choices on the shape and the color palette to set itself away from Avalonia. And for each, we do travel through the Strange World. So, really kind of defining, tight palettes for each of the areas, so that the way I know Merdad likes to describe it is that you then go back and you say, oh, well, yeah, you remember that world that they were in, that was all kind of the oranges, or the yellows, so that you get a feeling for traveling through the movie.
For designing the world and the characters, we kind of overall path was pulp magazines, adventures, and French comic books. And for the world, more to the mountains, environments like Andes, Alps, Himalayas, even North Europe, like wherever we could find a huge mountain with peaks. And then we come to the farm, which Don sent me lots of pictures from their farm from Iowa. And then as you see, like it's go on. And like for me, living in the city, it was a long time that I haven't seen the farm. So it was amazing that how much you can see in the distance. And then that's a real world. So we kind of know it doesn't need explanation. What is that? We kind of buy that and we go for the story. And the challenge, second part of challenge which was more challenging, was the Strange World. Everything is new. Everything you have to explain. We have a plant that is burping in the background, but it's great, designed well, it looks well, you can touch it, but it's too close to the character, and the character is talking about something else. Now you have to push it to the shadow. Now you have to make it sit back. So designing something from scratch and having it to be serving the story first and then being its own world. was so challenging and important?
Yeah, I was going to say, so we do travel through multiple places in Strange World, and they each kind of have their own character. The area that we first go into is very much this area that doesn't have a ground. That's really, it's built out of these platforms. And the platforms have had a life cycle. And this is, I think, one of the exciting parts about, building a world in a Disney animated movie is that we put a history in, like an evolution of how that world evolved, and it was very much built out of, there are trees in this world that will tend to grow and fuse together and create these larger and larger platforms that ultimately then other trees start growing off of. And that really characterizes that area of Strange World. Some of the other areas are a little bit more cavernous, where they're going through what would feel more like a cave, or kind of this is what ultimately is a very large space, because even their airship is big, but some cavernous areas. Some other areas that are really very, very open and have creatures flying through them the whole time. And then on a color palette side, each of them has their own color palette, so you do get this feeling and understanding that you're traveling through, all of these worlds.
We have an amazing art director of characters, Jin Kim, that he kind of have his touch in all the characters and everything. We were inspired by French comic books and overall comic books, and also pulp magazines, that what they represent, and also a big part was coming from a story. Don Hall himself had a first initial sketch for the character, so it was great to see all of these coming together. And then we have these characters for the main characters. Now we have to kind of have the whole the city. We have the city, we have farms, and for the costume of the characters, we kind of woven everything together. The pattern you see on the characters' shirt, you can see it on the buildings, you can see it in the other people in the city. So it was kind of starting from comic books, and then the evolution of every artist joining a team and bringing their idea. We have this artist, Limei Xie, and then she was showing us information and the research that she gathered, that in like the movie is like kind of early 1900, and if you go back in the time and go to village and go to places, like people decorate their buildings, their animals, their shirt with the same patterns, so everything is interconnected. So we have that, and everybody kind of add their touch to that.
Yeah, I was going to say the color palette plays a huge role, in Strange World. Mainly so that when you first enter into it, you immediately know you're in a totally different place. So the transition from Avalonia and the mountains that they travel through is so different in color, from that big reveal into the Strange World, that it really kind of like it sparks this emotion, in you of okay, well, I really have traveled, someplace totally different. And my dad, and our team, we're also very good about, specifying that you want to try to keep that color palette not all over the place, but very unified. So each of the areas that we go through in the Strange World, has a color palette that is all kind of within a similar set of of colors, to be able to keep it harmonious and not too busy that it would say pull away from the story and make your eye kind of go all over the image, but then also to really kind of give it a sense of location, so that the color is one of the telling bits of understanding, okay, well, I'm in this area, or no, I've traveled over to this other area.
Yeah, the creatures was the most fun. So we have every size of creatures. It's get bigger and bigger and bigger. We have creatures we call Transportosaurus. It's like dinosaurs, giant dinosaurs, and we have small creatures that it's like a plant. It's look like a plant. It has it's on the ground, and when you go to it, it's just fly off. So and then you have all these different colors and different size of creatures, but what was so amazing for me was when you see the movie all the way through, end of the movie, you know what's going on. When you go back and see the movie again for the second time, each one of them has a role, has a meaning, why they are there, why it's like that. And it was, the challenging part was we have characters running on top of other characters. It's like, which we call the stream. And then we have the huge character Transportosaurus that carry other characters we call nubbins, which is smaller, like all these different forms. And the other challenging part I'm excited about is at some point Don came to us and said, what do you guys think if there is no face? They don't have any face, no eyes, no mouth. What do you think? And because we always like difficult challenges, and we said, yes, let's do it. So we designed it, and we have poses and everything for them. And the animation team did a great job on that, to bring a character that doesn't look like a character and you feel it. It's so cool. I'm so excited for everyone to see it.
I was going to say, so I'm most looking forward to sharing the sequence where we're in the strange world, and the characters are needing to kind of get across this open space, really that has no floor and is between all of these the platforms that really form the strange world. So they choose to run across one of the streams that are also flowing through the world. But those streams are actually characters themselves that are flying through space. So it's something that we usually try never to do, in an animated movie, which is we have hero characters running across a stream of other characters, which on a technical side as well is really, really difficult to try to make all of that work, and takes a coordination from a lot of different departments. Our crowds group, which works with the kind of the large numbers of creatures, along with animation, and I think it's a great sequence that really kind of sums up a lot of the big environment work that ended up happening, in Strange World, because we have a huge open, probably some of the largest vistas, in through the movie, along with it being filled with life and having the characters kind of run through all that space.
I would say the movement on this film is more caricatured than what we typically tend to do. Justin and I were really inspired by films from the 40s and 50s, as well as some of the more modern films like A Treasure Planet. Early on, we were looking into what would the style of animation be on this film, and we were looking at references from films like Peter Pan and Sleepy Beauty, Ichabod and Mr. Toad, and they are caricaturing. They're still very believable performances, but the way they're caricaturing and really designing those poses is something we were trying to put into our animation for this film. And a lot of that was inspired by Jin Kim's character designs for the characters on this film.
So I think it's interesting because I think Searcher and Yeager's relationship outwardly appears as if they're opposites, but I think a lot of their conflict is because they are the same. I think Searcher spent a lot of his young life with Yeager exploring and sort of living in that world. And then there's a bit of a break, and Searcher realizes that he doesn't want to be an explorer. He wants to be at home. He wants to farm. He wants to have a family in a way that Yeager doesn't quite. And Yeager is so focused on his goals and conquering and sort of what for Yeager, the goal is to get to the other side of the mountains, and for Searcher, it's to raise a family and all these other things. But I think in both of their cases, the thing that is driving them is this idea of legacy. And for Yeager, he wants to cross the mountains to have that be the legacy that he leaves for his son. And in the case of Searcher, he is sort of the father of Pando, and he farms, and he wants to be available to Ethan in the same way. Because what he's concerned about is what he leaves behind for his son. So in a lot of ways, they're very similar in what they want, and they kind of just grow up in different times and with different influences, and they care about slightly different things. And so you combine that with the performances from Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal, and there's a lot of stuff for us to play with. They play the characters extremely differently. So like Dennis is way out in space with how big he is, and it's phenomenal to watch and to animate, and Jake is super grounded and really funny, and it's really fun to watch them play against each other.
I love both of those characters. Meridian is a mom, and I am a mom myself, and so I think she's a really cool mom. She loves her family a lot. She is an incredible flyer, and she trying to make sure I don't put any spoilers in there. She feels very capable, and I think for her, I mean, with all of our characters, we're always trying to come up with characters, like what makes them specific. And I think with Callisto, early on, she went through some different design changes, and then Lucy Liu came on board with her character. And definitely Callisto is a character that the directors always wanted to be kind of like, she's the leader of Avalonia, but she's also really badass in the sense, like, she can go and save the day, and she'll be the first one to battle some of the big giant tentacle monsters. And so we really wanted her motion to feel very athletic and capable, I guess, as well.
Ethan is Searcher's son. Ethan is a kid who grew up on a farm in a world that's powered by Pando, which his father, I guess, didn't quite invent but discovered. I think Don has always described Ethan as a farm kid. He just kind of is who he is. And when he goes into Strange World, it becomes apparent to him that as much as Searcher wants him to be a farmer, Ethan kind of likes being in this new place and exploring. And a lot of the movie for Ethan is about figuring out who he is. And I think in a lot of ways that was kind of made our job really easy in terms of making him feel like a 16-year-old, because Ethan is excited and figuring things out and learning about the world, which feels like what it's like to be 16. I mean, the other thing that we're pulling on a lot is Mallory Walters, who's the supervisor for Ethan, had pulled a lot of specific reference and specific things from Jabuki. He makes just really interesting, kind of weird choices that we were really excited to put into Ethan's performance to make him feel really grounded and specific and different than all the other characters.
Splat was definitely a challenge for us, because there's really no reference or anything you can look at when you're coming up with choices. Splat does not have a face, so there's no facial features that can sell a particular mood or a thought process. So all of it is being sold by body language and the timing, and just people making really imaginative choices. There's many times throughout this film where Splat is trying to communicate something to Ethan or Meridian or one of the other characters, but how it's like if Splat could talk, it'll say this, but it can't talk. So he has to communicate with all the tentacles and nubbins, an idea. And it was really fun for Justin and I to go into animation dailies where people are showing their first pass of a Splat scene and seeing the crazy imaginative choices that they're making with this character. And we would often laugh out loud when we were seeing some of these performances, because they're just some really entertaining ideas in there. I think Justin, at one time, because I took this for the presentation, you cut the tentacle covered bean when you were asking for how would you describe Splat?
Yeah.
And that made me laugh.
Legend is the Clade family dog. I guess he's more specifically Ethan's dog. Legend is a simple, sweet, happy boy. Legend just one of the decisions that we made early on is Legend is a dog. Like, a lot of times we'll sort of anthropomorphize and allow our animal characters to communicate in the way that people do. But what was really fun on this film was just letting Legend be a dog, which is really fun when you put everyone in these super dangerous situations and everyone is feeling how dire everything is, but Legend doesn't know what's going on. Legend's just happy to be there, happy to be around people. And Legend's just super fun in any scene that he shows up in.
I would say similar with Splat, the creatures were mostly people coming up with imaginative choices. We didn't really have a lot of references. We were looking sometimes for just underwater sea creatures and like, how does a jellyfish move? We really wanted with the creatures to get that organic fluidity. There's no real like bones or anatomical structure in there. So really wanting like rounded corners and rounded edges and that nice organic motion with the creatures. I think, let's see, we had some really fun names for the creatures. Things like Flatty Patty, the Poot Pickles. There's so many. And a lot of times it's like, what are we going to call these things? And, you know, somebody in a meeting will come up with some crazy idea, but they were all, the directors, you know, had ideas for what they needed to do in the film overall. And Justin, you should talk about your test, because Justin came on and did like 15 tests of the ways one of these creatures could work, just to see what will the directors gravitate for.
I think one of the first things that I did when I rolled onto the show, we had this creature that doesn't have an interesting name. We had a creature that's like part plant, part butterfly, and there had been some drawings of how it might move, and they're kind of what you expected. Flies around, it feels like a dragonfly. And so I had started there, but I think one of the things that we wanted to establish early on is that we wanted to look at these designs and look at how they seem like they should work and do the opposite of that. Because we really wanted to find something surprising. So I had done something like 15 versions of how does this thing kind of open up and fly away. And some of them are butterflies and some of them are jellyfish, but some of them are like, what if it spun its wings like a helicopter? Or what if it kind of shot off like a torpedo? Or what if the things on its back kind of inflated and it lifted up like a hot air balloon and then it kind of like puttered a lot. So a lot of it for us was just trying to figure out like, what's fun, what's interesting, what's something that you don't expect, and trying not to put too many rules around it, to just let animators try something and make a weird choice that was fun, that maybe you notice it in the background happening and you're like, that's kind of interesting. A lot of the Disney films from the 40s and 50s, especially the package features, because it's a lot of shorts, so things like Make My Music and Fun and Fancy Free and Melody Time, and Ichabod and Mr. Toad. A lot of these are a little bit broader, a lot of them are frequently based in music, and so the musicality of the performance and the rhythm and the broadness of them is kind of the point in a lot of cases, and they kind of become this showcase for really fun, interesting animation that's a lot about how shapes are moving on screen, how we're drawing things. There's a lot of really talented animators at a great point in their careers, and so for us, we saw the designs that Jin had done, which were based on French comics and felt a little bit cartoony or a little bit more pushed than the stuff that we're used to doing. And Don and Kui had said that they did want. We knew we were going to places where it still needed to feel very human and very sincere and very complicated. So we wanted to keep all of that, but we wanted to try and animate things a little bit more from the lens of the films in the 40s and 50s, where it's a little less focused on anatomy and it's a little less focused on pure naturalism, and more focused on how do shapes move and how flexible can the character be, and how much shape change can you get between this pose and that pose, and find a zone where that really melded with our more naturalistic performance and hopefully came up with something a little bit different.